Hey guys, it's Sean from Tall Tree Audio. Now, I'm not going to win any Academy Awards for this performance, but it does bring up a big struggle that a lot of composers have, and that is perfectionism. Today, we'll talk about a couple of ways that you can reduce your perfectionism, and I'll teach you some tips and tricks so that you can increase your workflow and release your music faster. Let's get into it. All right. Today we are working in Cubase, but don't let that scare you away. These practices are applicable through all DAWs. We will approach the composing workflow in 3 different areas: song structure, MIDI and orchestration, and mixing and mastering. The goal here is to decrease the amount of songs that you get stuck on, and therefore increase your speed and effectiveness as a composer. Let's start by writing our main chord structure and melody. A good rule of thumb is to start with an 8-bar structure. This will serve as our song outline. It is not permanent, so do your best to avoid making tweaks early on. We are focused on completing the structure. I want this song to be about 1:30, so I will copy and paste these 8 bars until I hit that length. Now that we have our track length, I will create an intro that is simpler than what we have currently. Here is our current chord structure. Let's delete the majority of the shorter chords and elongate the others. Here's what we are left with now. Let's double that in length to complete our intro. Now we're going to create the back end or climax of the track. It should be some variation of your original chord structure. Okay, let's double that in length to complete our back end. Look at that! We have a basic song structure. Writing your songs in this way will decrease the amount of times that you get stuck not knowing how to move forward. Let's get started on filling out this track. Don't feel obligated to start on the intro. Choose whatever section that interests you most. I'm going to start on the middle section. Let's open up a string ensemble patch. For this instrument, I could just copy and paste the piano MIDI. Here's what that sounds like. Strings generally sound very fake without modulation, so let's add that now. Is it perfect? Not by a long shot, but small mistakes should be ignored while we continue to add parts. Here's some piano textures I picked out to add. Next, let's add a solo cello. And next, a spiccato string. And let's add a harmony to that. Great! Now that we have the middle section filled out, let's move to the back end. So let's start with a brass ensemble patch. And just like the strings, I'll copy and paste the MIDI from our scratch piano. Here's what that sounds like. Alright, let's add some octave spiccato strings. And to top it off, we'll add a choir. Alright, let's head back to the intro and we'll finish there. I'm going to start off by adding a couple of pads. Let's also add a low pad and copy the MIDI from the scratch piano. Alright, we now have our orchestration laid out with 3 to 4 instruments per section. Everything else beyond this point will be focused on editing and improving what is already there. Think of it like a marble sculpture. Your job now is to chisel out the details. Alright, here is the chiseled out version of this track. Let's give it a listen and then go through and take a look at some of the layers I added. Okay, let's talk about it. As you can see, I haven't done much to the keys. I just added a couple of parts here in the intro. For the synths, I added some chords below in the low mid range, and I added a sub for the back end. For strings, I got a little bit more detailed. This is where your time and effort will be rewarded most. For example, the staccato strings here. Let's solo one of the tracks, and then I will bring in the others so you can hear the difference. Alright, now let's add the other layers. Your job is to blur the line between fake and real, because in the end, no matter what we do, these are still pre-recorded samples, but adding layers will humanize your parts. Okay, farther down, we still have the same choir. I didn't change that much. And in brass, you can see I added quite a few layers here. I'll play just what we started with, and then again with everything else added. And here it is with the added layers. Again, the same thing with strings. Adding layers will humanize your sample instruments. And finally, down to percussion, the only thing I've added here is a swell and crash. Let's listen to that. Now let's talk briefly about mixing and mastering. I would say 80% of your mixing is gain staging, just moving these guys up and down. The reason for that is when working with sample libraries, your instruments will already be within the right ballpark. If you gain stage correctly, the rest of your mixing process goes way faster. The next step is making your main instruments pop and shine. For example, here is a solo cello, and I'm using some light upward compression to make it stand out more. Here it is without the upward compression. Here it is with the compression. Let's listen again with all instruments, and I'll disable this. You can still hear it in the mix, but it's definitely not a feature. Let's turn this on and listen again. See, it just gives it that little extra push. If you notice down here, I'm using the same reverb send for all of my strings, except for a couple. That's because I want them to sound like they're in the same room. I do the same thing with my brass, and it's a simple way to squeeze more realism out of your sample instruments. With choir, I have a large room reverb and also some upward compression to make it pop. Let's remove those and do a before and after. Here it is with. It sounds a little more wide and a little bit stronger. Let's see what we've got on our master. I've got some multiband compression, a tape emulator, upward compression, a mastering plate reverb, and a final limiter. Each of these plugins is making very minor changes, but I would say the most important one is the limiter. Here I'm using IM Pusher from Waves. Let's unmute everything and see what's going on. This is turned off. And on. It sounds a little bit wider from the stereo image here, and a little bit thicker with this knob that adds saturation. My advice to you when mixing and mastering is, don't take yourself so seriously. Improvement here happens in the long game. Just keep up the repetition and I guarantee you will get better. And there you have it. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. And if you like this video, hit that subscribe button. It helps me out a lot. Thanks, guys.